And welcome. Good morning to you out there. How did everybody do with that extra hour of sleep? Isn't that nice?
Great. I loved it, actually.
Well, I went to bed at the same time as I usually do, which meant I got an extra hour of sleep last night because the time changed. So, oh, you went to bed later? Okay, so the book that I'm talking about today is Work with Spiritual Practice. It is by Louis Richmond, who spent many years in a Buddhist colony. If you've heard Sue talk about birthing, having to birth a talk, and how it was just so hard. And that was kind of the way I was with this book when I trying to figure out what to do, because there's so much in it. And I finally just decided, you know what, I'm because they talk about stress and work and all of these different aspects of work, and I finally decided I am just going to concentrate on anger in the workplace and dealing with anger, because I think that that's something not just at work but in our personal lives. I think that that's something that we deal with, especially it feels like right now there are a lot of really angry people, and so he talks about the fact that anger is one of those really hot emotions. James and I were just talking about this. It's one of those really hot energy emotions. And because of that, it gives us an opportunity, a real opportunity to have a spiritual practice within anger, and our own anger and other people's anger, and trying to find a spiritual way to deal with that. So, I dealt with a lot of anger in my job. I started as a police officer in the Air Force, and I decided to join the Air Force because I didn't know what else to do, and my big brother said, make sure that you have a job. Don't let them pull you into the military without a specific job, because they're just going to stick you in whatever. And so the recruiter said, well, how about law enforcement? They didn't start letting women into law enforcement in the military until the 70s, and this was 1982. So to me that just said challenge. And so I thought, okay, I can do that. And I did not like conflict or confrontation. So of course, being a cop seemed like a logical thing to do for somebody who doesn't like confrontation. And it was hard because I was small and a female in a really male-dominated situation. So I felt like I had to really prove myself. So I was angry a lot. Not only because of that, but when you go into the military, they have you fill out what they call as a dream sheet, which is where you want to go. And I do not like cold weather. Cold just makes me angry. It really does. And so if it's below 55, I'm cold. And so I put in for Florida. Let's go to Florida. That would be a good place. And they sent me to Alaska. It really made me angry. It's like that misdirected anger, which we were going to talk about later, which I figure probably there was somebody who is not happy in their life, and they're sitting there and they're filling out these forms, and they're like, oh, right, you want to go to Florida? Alaska, that's where you're going. Had a fight with their wife that morning or whatever. It's that old thing, though, that the universe sometimes does for you what you won't do for yourself. I never, ever would have gone to Alaska, ever. Never on my radar. And I absolutely fell in love with the place after I had been there for a while. And so grateful for that experience that I never, ever would have had before.
Whereabouts in Alaska were you stationed?
I was in Anchorage.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an Army base and an Air Force base there, and also in Fairbanks. And so I was able to travel up into Fairbanks as well while I was there. And it was incredible, and I just absolutely loved it. So that after I got out of the military, I spent the rest of my career in continuing in law enforcement with state and federal prisons. And again, you know, I'm dealing with people who are not living their best life, you know, who are really struggling, and lots and lots of anger, and learned how to deal with that conflict, and learned how to deal with that confrontation. A lot of you have heard me talk about it before, that I didn't do that well when I first started out. I for a long time, for a lot of years, I didn't do that well because I still had that same mentality of feeling like I had to prove myself, and feeling like as a small female, I had to do it. I had to be really strict, and I had to prove to you that I was the one that was in charge. And you can imagine how that went. With a bunch of men who were angry with their situation in the first place, and I'm trying to put my thumb on them and prove to them that I'm in charge and you're going to do what I tell you to do, in a situation where they already feel powerless and don't have much of any control over what's happening in their lives. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle every single day, and I felt angry all the time because I felt I continued to have these confrontations with people, even though I felt like I was approaching it softly. It was always a fight. It was always a fight, and what I finally learned was that, you know, I kept watching it, and I kept thinking, what's wrong? And then I finally realized it was me. When I started coming to Unity, that's when my life drastically and completely changed. My attitude completely changed because I realized it was me. I realized that I was the problem, and what they felt from me was contempt. They felt from me that I saw them as less than. And a lot of that is the training that you get when you're especially in a prison system, because they want you to detach. They want you to not get emotionally attached to people, because you can be compromised. A lot of the people in there, they're really, really master manipulators. And it's very easy to become manipulated and then be compromised. And so I took that to the far degree. And nobody was going to get one over on me, by golly. And so when I spoke to them, when I had confrontations with them, it was because they felt from me that contempt, that feeling that you don't deserve anything. You deserve to be here. You should be here. You should be punished for being here. And I'm in charge, and I'm better. And coming to Unity, it was totally changed, because I was able to recognize that they did deserve my kindness, that we're all children of God. No matter what, they didn't deserve that. Another thing that really, really changed for me was did you guys see the movie Dead Man Walking with Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn? And Sean Penn plays, based on a true story. Sean Penn plays the part of someone who, he was on death row, and Susan Sarandon plays a nun who went to see him, and he was just angry at her and angry at her, and she ended up fighting for the rights and to get rid of capital punishment and the death penalty. And at that time, I just thought, well, I even remember having a conversation with someone because they had started allowing inmates to get transplants, and before I had this transformational experience, they had decided to allow inmates to have transplants, and I was like, you know what? If it's between somebody that I know and an inmate getting a transplant, I just think it's wrong. I don't think inmates should get a transplant, because that's not fair. But I went and that changed. And this nun recognized that no matter what, that this inmate who was on death row was still a child of God. He was worthy of kindness and caring and had intrinsic value just because he was a human being. And she came here, and the actual nun came here to Springfield and gave a talk, and I went to listen to her speak. And one thing that she said completely changed my life and completely changed the way I viewed things. She said, imagine if someone took a snapshot of your life at the worst moment, at that one moment when you have done that one thing that you are most embarrassed, that you are most ashamed of, that one moment when you have done something that is the worst thing that you could have done. And imagine somebody takes a snapshot of that. And then they spend the rest of your life, they treat you based on that one moment in your life. And that's who you are, no matter what you did before, no matter what you do afterward, it doesn't matter. That's who you are. And that's what we do to people who are incarcerated. That's what we do to people who are on death row. It doesn't matter who they become afterward. What matters is just that moment there. And that completely changed the way I dealt with people who are incarcerated, and completely changed the experience. So the book, Work as a Spiritual Practice, really spoke to me because I got to the point where I felt like my work really was a spiritual practice for me. It really was an opportunity for me to be a presence for people, these men who spent some of them the rest of their lives incarcerated, and didn't have people who talked to them and spoke to them with kindness and with grace and with love. And I was able to do that, and it was an absolutely amazing experience. So, like I said, we're going to concentrate on anger today because that's huge in the jobs today. I think, is anybody who's here still working? Or all of you? John's still working, I think, and James is still working. I think the rest of us are retired, aren't we? So, but still, we have to work. We have to deal with angry people. Okay. So I'm going to just read some of what he has talked about. Again, it's Work as a Spiritual Practice is the book. Anger at work is a big problem. For some people, it's the biggest problem. Of course, the workplace is not the only part of our lives where anger may arise, but the workplace is the prime locale where other people have real power over us, over our career and our livelihood. These people assess us, they judge us, and command us. And besides our superiors, these are customers, vendors, competitors, and partners, all of whom can frustrate us, disappoint us, cheat us, and upset us. This power imbalance can exaggerate the impact of workplace anger. So have any of you guys experienced that, where that power imbalance in your job has created some huge part of anger? Let me pass that mic back to John there.
Thank you.
Is it on the bottom? No?
No, I think it's
here. There we go. There we go.
It may take just a second. It took just a second. Go ahead.
So anyways, okay, yeah, it's on there. For several years, I worked mostly with people who are on probation or parole, doing substance use counseling and setting up programs and such. And so this group of people they were extremely angry at it was like their POs become kind of like a family member that they never can get rid of. And so that's just kind of so that was for me it was, I really got into a lot of the Buddhist folks who deal with anger. And a lot of them deal with anger a lot because of the not nice things that people do to each other in this world, and a part of the letting go. And for me, the key was just non-judgmental stance, just coming to terms to be able to just go, I'm not going to judge you no matter what. And in turn, I also don't judge myself. And it just made it much more bearable.
I'm just curious, which one did you find more difficult than not judging yourself or not judging other people?
I don't think that what was difficult was that if you try to do just one, you can't do it. Mm-hmm. That a lot of people think, well, I don't judge other people. I only judge myself, but then it's not true. If you're self-judging, then you can't help but to judge other people, and vice versa. It's all connected to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stella, did you have a comment? Oh, I thought you did.
Yeah. And did you have something? Gwenda has something.
I've throughout my life had problems with co-workers and supervisors, and the supervisors having power over you when you feel you're being treated unfairly, okay, and they still have that power over you. So having to adjust to that. But when you talk about, have you ever had an experience like that? Yes. I think everybody that works in the workforce probably has had that experience. Mm-hmm. And there really is, you can do rebuttals to reviews, but it doesn't help you. In my experience, it wasn't helpful. What was helpful was changing my attitude. And actually, in a way, changing my attitude caused some coworkers even to become more, I don't want to say vicious, but more unaccepting of me. Because the more accepting I became, it's like they wanted to get a rise out of me. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't get that, they just kept trying.
Right.
And the more I tried to apply, the more I practice I was going to say Courts on Miracle principles, but the more I practice that, some people actually seem to become angrier. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's absolutely true. It's like, they talk about in Al-Anon, they talk about there's a dance that happens between the alcoholic and someone who's in a relationship with them. And there's this dance that they do. And then if it changes, if the person gets sober, the dance changes. And so it becomes a bigger struggle. If if the other person in the relationship starts doing things differently, the dance changes. And it's a struggle because now I don't know where my steps are. Now I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I also think that sometimes what happens is when we as people start doing things differently, and take our I don't know exactly how to say this. We're not judgmental. We're trying to bring a more spiritual aspect into the way we react and the way we respond to people. Sometimes it holds a mirror up to other people, and what they see is their own shortcomings. They see things that you're doing that they feel like they should be doing themselves. And you are acting the way they would really like to be acting. You are becoming the person that they really would like to become, and they're not doing it, and so it holds a mirror up to them, and then they get angry, and so they're going to lash out at you because you're holding a mirror up, and they're seeing their own shortcomings and their own things that their character defects, if you will, and they are seeing that, and I think that happens quite a bit too.
Mary, is that because, not in the workplace, but when they're holding the mirror up, do I need to?
Yes.
When you're holding the mirror up,
Go ahead and take that.
and someone reacts in anger toward you, I think I'm understanding that you're saying that it's a feeling of envy that they have for you, and that's why they're angry with you. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it's envy. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't know if it's. Do you think it's partially envy? It's hard to see your character defects if you're not in a position, if you're not going to change it. It's much easier. Again, in Al-Anon, that's one of the big things that we do is we talk about our character defects, and we look at them, and then it's not enough just to look at them. It's you have to do the work in order to try and do something different. And if somebody sees it, but they're not really willing or not ready to do the work to make it different, it's just this glaring thing that's right there in their face going, you should be doing something different, and you're not. And so,
That answers,
yeah. Yeah.
And guilt's not dealt with. It's devastating.
Right, and it becomes shame, and that's Brené Brown talks about that a lot. Guilt will bring you to do something different. Guilt it can be a positive thing, or shame just leads to addiction and depression and self-destructive behavior. And yeah, you're right. If guilt isn't dealt with, then it becomes shame. Okay. He says anger doesn't happen out of the blue. It usually arises because of a perceived injustice or unfairness. For example, a mere thought, a word, or a phrase that can pop into our head can just make us furious. And I know that, man. I'll replay that. I can't tell you how many times that I've had whole conversations in my head that never happened. I'm making up this whole story in my head, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say that, and then oh gosh, I hate it when they do that, and then I'm going to say this, and then all of a sudden I'm just enraged, and it didn't even happen, But we make up these stories in our heads, or something has happened. And it's like, and they're just replaying over and over in your head, and you think of all of these things, man, I should have said this, You know, oh, I could have said that, and that would have been so good. You know. So there are other ways that we can deal with some of this anger with, even if it's justified. Some of the ways that we deal with it, we either can conceal it or we can vent. Sometimes, you know, you go home and you just have to talk about it, and which is good. That venting is always good. It's where we get into trouble is when we obsess, and it's like all you want to talk about. And I know that I'm guilty of that, where I just get obsessed, and and my wife is so patient, and I'm so grateful because she will just let me. And at some point she'll go, "You've said that a lot," you know, and that's my cue that okay, I'm obsessing, and I'm going to have to do something different. But she's very patient and she'll allow me to vent for a while before. But that's our cue. You've said that a lot.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that because she's just stating a fact. She's not judging it one way or the other. And
Right.
It's just saying, you know, yes, you said that a lot.
Yeah. Right. Right. And it is. And I, you know, that's one of the things I love is that it isn't a judgment of, oh my gosh, it may be in her head. She may be going, oh my gosh, I'm so ready to not hear this, you know, because I've heard it over and over and over again, and it's not different. I'm not saying anything different. I'm just rehashing the same thing over and over and over again, which is not productive. Sometimes our actual anger disguises itself as confusion, indecision, or even depression. In such cases, simply to understand that we're actually angry is valuable. How many times have we been in a situation where that's where we get, where we're just confused and I know sometimes I get to a point where I just feel paralyzed. It's like I have no idea what to do, and I just feel paralyzed. And then if I really stop and again, my wife will say, you know, where did that come from? What's happened, and where did that come from? And I can backtrack it and realize, oh my God, I'm angry. That's what this is I'm angry. And then once I can identify it, then it's like, okay, now I can deal with this. But a lot of times anger is the easiest emotion. We're able to quickly deal with it. But sometimes I think even, especially in our spiritual community, we feel like anger is an emotion that we shouldn't be having. You know, we shouldn't allow ourselves to get angry. And when we do that, though, it's there. We're angry. We get angry because we're human, but we don't allow ourselves to feel it. And that's one thing that he talks about is it's tempting to leap immediately from experiencing anger to wanting to see what the cause of it is and not allowing ourselves to actually feel it. And he says the Buddhist approach to anger is a different emphasis. It's not just ignoring anger's cause, but it begins with the physical sensation of anger in our body. When we're all riled up in it, it's difficult to be objective about the cause of the anger anyway.
Yeah.
I think Kathy's got
Anger is one of those really hard ones for me because I have learned to internalize, and once you internalize it to the point that you actually forget what caused it because you don't want to look into it. Instead, you just want to play the scenario of I'm hurt, oh woe is me, over and over and over. That you don't deal with it actually, and so I think what you're saying is very true there.
And I think we become, if you don't deal with it, you're going to become the emotion. That's all you are. So you're just angry, like you said, the people in the prison or you in your job. If you don't deal with the anger, you actually just become that anger, and you're angry all the time about everything. And when you take the time to look at the thoughts and where that came from, and I have found that most of those thoughts weren't even mine. I mean, I had adopted those from my parents or from someone else, but most of the time, when I looked at them, it's like, well, I don't even think that. I mean, I don't believe that. I don't believe that way. And then that's a big eye opener when you're able to do that.
Sure. And that's one of the things that I think that I love about Unity is we talk a lot about having things in our past that no longer serve us, habits, emotions, and our responses to things were things that we learned as we were growing up. A lot of them were defense mechanisms. They were the way we survived in trauma that happened to us as children, and so those are things that we developed to survive the situation. And a lot of people, they live their entire lives and they never recognize that these were defense mechanisms. These were things that helped me survive at the time, but I'm no longer that person. I'm no longer in that situation. And these emotions and these feelings, these responses no longer serve me with who I am now. And so, yeah, I think that was a really good point. He says, in a spiritual sense, we are ultimately responsible for our own anger. It's a rare anger that is wholly unjustified. In fact, some anger is justified and appropriate. Anger arises from some mixture of external and internal causes of justice and injustice, as well as our personal history of hurts and unresolved family issues. So he goes on to talk about some of the different things around anger. And one of the biggest things that causes anger is what? Fear. You stop and you look at what's an underlying factor of anger, and a lot of it is fear. I know as a parent, if one of my kids did something that was really unsafe, the first thing I did was scream at him, and then once I calmed down, it's like I said, it's like, I'm sorry, I screamed at you though because I was scared. That scared me. I was afraid you were going to get hurt. Again, fear comes up as a defense mechanism to protect us, and that anger comes up to try and put a barrier up and say, whoa, stop, because I'm of fear. The physical sensations of fear and anger are quite similar. Our heart races, our faces flush, our jaw and our neck tighten. The main difference is that anger tends to urge us forward, to shout, to fight, to lash out, while fear urges us to run away, to flee, to hide. He says our deepest fear, of course, is the fear of dying or becoming destroyed, of becoming nothing. What do you think about that?
Well, that sounds like the ego.
I mean, it's almost a description of the function of ego, is that it is to protect itself from being gone, disappearing.
And so, and I agree. I think that the fear of, for me, I'm not afraid of dying because of what we believe, because we are just a continuation. I'm not afraid of dying. But when he talks about being destroyed, of becoming nothing, I think it's more that fear of not being remembered, of not making a difference for me. But he goes on to say, to the extent that who we are is defined by our job, our work role, and our perceived status. Anything that destroys that identity can represent a serious threat.
Like not having any worth. I have no value in this world is a type of death, you
Right.
know.
Right. And I think especially in the way the workplace is, I know we know a lot of people, and we may have at some point been that person who feels like they're defined by their work. I know a lot of people don't want to retire because their job was where they got their value. Their job was where they found their self-worth and how they defined themselves. So if you're working with someone who feels that way, and then something comes in that threatens that for them, that may be a very good reason why that person becomes angry. You know, I had a recent situation where I had someone who the way they were treating me, I didn't understand the way they were treating me. It was very condescending and just little jabs and things that were happening. And I was like, I don't understand this. And I think what was happening was they felt threatened because I had just come into this new area, and I think they felt threatened that I was going to come in and take a position that they had. And once I recognized that, it was like, okay. I was able to just kind of back off and not take it personally when that happened. You know, and it resolved itself because something happened that they recognized that I had no intention of that. And so the relationship completely switched once that happened, that they recognized that I was not a threat to them. But I think we find that a lot in the workplace. He goes on to say, is anger justifiable? Anger invariably feels at least somewhat justified. When we are angry, we have the sense that it comes from outside of us, from something that someone did or said. That sense of injustice or being wronged is fuel that keeps anger burning. And real injustice does occur in everyone's life everywhere in the world. Injustice fuels conflicts all over the planet, from disagreements in families and companies to the religious wars, ethnic conflicts, and terrorist attacks that cause so much suffering in the world all over. Whether the injustice involves a few people or an entire nation is not a matter of kind, but only a degree.
I did want to point something out with that too, because I do feel, you know, I mean, I've gone through a period in my life where I had just a lot of anger, and I'm not in that place anymore. And thank God I'm not in that place anymore. Does that mean that I never get angry? Absolutely not. I think we all go to that place at times. Mm-hmm. What I did want to say, though, is that through maturity, through work, whatever it is, it becomes a very small segment of our life. It becomes something that we go into it, sometimes out of control, but then we can more easily and quickly get out of it and realize sometimes, oh, that was foolish or whatever. But I did want to point out that I think that sometimes anger is a great motivator. Mm-hmm. And it's also a great justifier. I'm just throwing out a really wild example. If you saw a bunch of kids beating up a homeless person, you want to get angry because you're motivating them to change their behavior immediately and take that person out of danger. Mm-hmm. I can also get angry with myself for certain things, and it is a motivator to get me to change my behavior when I'm not really seeing the whole picture and not really getting what's going on. So and I think a lot of these things that we look at as quote bad do have their place.
Sure.
I do want to have shame about some things that I've done. And I want other people to have shame about something, but I don't look at shame as being something that's a good thing. And so I did want to say, hey, there is another point to some of these things
Sure.
too, I think. We
Sure.
just don't want them to be out of control. We don't want to be addicted to them. We don't want them to control our lives or others.
Right.
Yeah, kind of along those same lines, Marcia Linehan, who developed dialectical behavior therapy, identified 8 emotions that are, and this is from anthropology work, that are involved with all humans. Every human has these 8 basic emotions, and of course anger is one of them, and sadness and some others. And the function, and then each of them have function as emotions. And for anger, the main function is, it's the emotion that we experience when a goal is being obstructed. So something that we desire, that we want, is being blocked, and so the energy comes up with that emotion to motivate us to act in some way to reach that goal. So sometimes when I'm talking to people at work about anger, it's like, okay, so what's being blocked? What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And is the anger helping it, or is it getting in the way? Or is it like you mentioned in another situation where fear or shame or embarrassment or something else is really what triggers the anger, and then anger isn't the underlying.
Right.
It's really that other emotion that really needs to be addressed.
Right. Right.
Well, and I think anger, when it first, like what Paul was saying, if somebody was injuring someone else, that makes sense. And even the Bible says, be angry, do not sin, do not let the sun go down in your anger, for it will give the devil a foothold in your life. And metaphysically, that just means anger is natural and meant to motivate us. It's just, do not sin just means channel it in such a way that it benefits rather than does harm.
Right.
Do not let the sun go down on your anger means, people just try to ignore. They just want to, I want to be real spiritual here. I don't want to be reactive. I want to be real spiritual. But that just pushes it down into subconscious, like what you were saying.
Right.
And then we're going to keep dealing with it until we deal with it.
Right.
And then the devil, is the ego. It reinforces the destructive ego, because I think that there's good ego too, but the destructive ego, reinforces that pattern and really puts out there the negativity. So that's kind of like my perspective on what, kind of what they were saying as well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Toby?
Abraham puts anger a step up on the emotional scale from
Depression.
despondency and overwhelmment. And so it's looked upon with Abraham as better to be angry. And we kind of had this discussion yesterday in Abe that it's better to be either hot or cold than it is to be neutral. And so one of the things Abe said was, it's better to have feeling, even if it's negative, than to just be totally passive.
Sure.
Because at least you're moving and you're feeling emotion, and when you feel emotion, you can begin to direct it.
Right.
If you're not feeling anything, you can't direct it.
Right. And which comes back to that where people it goes into depression and despondence, and me talking about I just feel paralyzed. And you're right. Anger, at least when you're angry, it's a movement. It's a hot energy. Energetically, it's a movement, and and it is though. It's like John said. Even God said to Noah, God tries to send him to Nineveh, and he's not going to go, and he goes up and he's sitting under a tree and
Jonah.
Jonah. Yeah. What did I say? Noah? Jonah. Sorry. Thank you for that. And he's sitting under a tree pouting because he doesn't want to go. And God comes to him and says, do you do well to be angry? And which is basically what you're saying is, okay, anger is good. It gets you moving, but what are you doing with it? Do you do well to be angry? Are you doing anything with it? Is it making any difference? Or are you just sitting in it being angry and stewing?
I'm not real sure, because the Course in Miracles says there's never any justification for anger. So my thought is, if I got to the point where I could react to an injustice, and like someone beating up on someone else, where I could approach that not out of fear, not out of anger, and still stop it. The word stop, if perhaps, would stop the people from beating up the other person, but still have control over myself, that I'm not acting out of anger. I'm acting out of compassion for those who are doing it and for the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I strive to reach that point. I have enormous rage when at injustice, and it does not serve me well. So I try very hard to be able to get to that point where I can react to what I feel is an injustice, and it's almost always, in fact, it is always other people. When I see someone else being what I think of, they are being harmed, okay, and I get this rage, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel the anger. I don't want to feel the rage. I want to be able to approach those people in a loving way. And do I believe that can stop violence? Yes, I do. And I'm sure there's many examples that people in here would know better than me. But I do believe that. I don't think anger is ever the answer.
I think that anger as a motivator, I think, is good. He talks about in here, even the Dalai Lama talks about when getting angry and then responding to that, and there being an action for that. You look at wars that were that have been fought against the Nazis, against some of the injustices. I don't agree with war. Was it necessary in order to stop the Nazis from killing millions and millions more people than they actually did? Yes. It had to be stopped. I think it's when our actions within our anger, I think it's about what's our motivation. My Al-Anon sponsor used to say that to me all the time. What's your motive? Which used to really tick me off sometimes, because my motive was just, I just want to get even. Because they did something wrong. They did something to me that was wrong, and it was hurtful, and I just want to get even. And that's the difference, I think, is your motive. James?
Well, I think too, it's like, what do we mean by anger? Anger to me is a physiological chemical response to a situation, and if someone were hurting you, I would always have that response. In Unity teachings, Eric Butterworth talks about the difference between responsibility and reaction. And I think that anger, we can deal with it in either way. We can be responsible, and which is the ability to respond to that situation without just being reactive, or we can react, which means, I'm going to punch that person in the face that punched you in the face because that really makes me mad. Those are two different, those would be two different ways of dealing with anger, but I don't know that we can change the natural physiological chemical experience of anger. I think to me, that's natural.
One thing I did want to say in response to Gwenda's comment, on A Course in Miracles, which I really love, but Dr. John Mundy, who's probably the foremost expert in A Course in Miracles now, at least that's the way I see him, that comment about anger, there's never any justification for it, that always kind of, intrigued me too. And I asked him about that, and he said, well, it's really where it comes down to where it just becomes less and less and less and less a mechanism in your life, and that, when we do get angry, there's never any justification for it lasting any longer than 15 minutes. That's what he had said. That was his interpretation of it anyway, so I just wanted to comment on that. That helped me out too, because yeah, we do get angry at times, and I think there is sometimes.
What came to my mind on that was
That if you're to the point to where you've experienced the anger and then you're justifying it,
yeah.
then that's an issue. That's a problem.
So we come back to, is anger justifiable? Is there justification for being angry?
Was Jesus justified for slamming the money lenders?
Turning over the tables.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what was the function? So there was
Function there, right? So he was trying to make a point. He was trying to educate and teach.
Yeah, I totally love what you're saying and everything, because I do believe I've seen in myself where my anger took over, and it made me miserable, and it made others miserable. It did harm. So destructive. So I get it. It's something that I see so much in people, in society, in myself, and it's something that absolutely has to be dealt with.
Well, and I think the next thing he talks about is misdirected anger. So, Elby, go ahead and say whatever.
Well, I got really angry. I think it was the day before yesterday. I was painting and I'd flipped the paint pan and spilled paint on the ground. And my cat walked through it.
Oh.
And, part of it was angry at myself for not realizing the cat was too stupid not to walk through it.
Right.
And part of it was fear that if he, licked the paint. But he felt that, and he walked away, and then he stopped, and then he walked away again, and I got him. But because he felt that in me, I took him in and I flipped him upside down and got the soap and put his feet under the sink. He knew that this was something that he needed to let me do. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting here thinking about this because I don't work, so I don't experience anger a whole lot. But it actually worked out for the best because his response was letting me get his feet clean. And as soon as his feet were clean, I wasn't afraid anymore, and he was fine. Mm-hmm. So, maybe you can apply that to something else, but sometimes it motivates for the good, and it turns out to be, a good situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's a perfect lead-in to the misdirected anger. When the kids were growing up, I would always, and they were in the car, something would happen, somebody would pull out in front of me or something, and Emily mostly would go, "Mom, why didn't you honk at them?" And I always taught them when they were little that if you see an old person that's driving, you never honk at them, and you can't yell at them because they're old, And I said our reflexes slow down as we get older, and we don't respond as quickly. They're doing the best that they can, and they're driving slow because they want to make sure they're safe. So you can't do that. So Emily, who suffers from some road rage, which I have to come clean and say she probably got from me when I was younger, and mainly because of time management, which she unfortunately also got from me. And so she'll call me and say, "Oh my gosh, I was late for class, I was running around, I was rushing around, and somebody pulled out in front of me and then went 25 miles an hour. She said, and then she'd say, and I couldn't even honk at them and I couldn't even yell at them because they were old. So, which I love, because it's like, okay. But that is complete and total misdirected anger. She's not angry at the person that pulled out in front of her. She's angry at herself because she didn't manage her time well enough, and now she's running late. And so I think we find that a lot in people, is that misdirected anger where somebody just blows up at you and you're going, what the heck? That was not an appropriate response to whatever is happening. And I know I am really bad with that. That's something that I really have to work on and am trying to work on. And again, my wife Sue is so patient, and she is really good at recognizing that it's not about her. And I think that that's one of the main things with misdirected anger, is stopping and going, okay, what's my part in this? Do I have a part in this? And if I don't have a part in this, then this is not about me. This has absolutely nothing to do with me. That was a huge part of when I worked in the prison system, was recognizing that these guys would get really angry and they would yell at me, and part of it was because they didn't have a lot of control over things that were happening in their lives, and so they would get angry really quickly and they would yell at me, and I would have to recognize this has nothing to do with me. This is not about me. So that's one thing that I think we really need to make sure that we check on, is this is not about me. So this has been really, really good. I love all of the conversation and the discussion. That's my favorite part of teaching classes. And so we are running out of time. Paul's given me the...
Thank you, Mary.
So, thank you guys so much. Thank you.
James, did you want to do this?
Oh, sure, I can.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mary. That was absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
Okay, we have some announcements for this week, Thursday, November 11th. From
In front of the camera.
I have to do it in front of the camera, either of us, so that I can turn off the camera when we're done.
Okay. So some announcements. Thursday, November the 11th, from 12:30 to 2:30, there will be a mat weave in the Fellowship Hall. On Friday, November the 12th at 7 p.m., it's the Unity Talent Show. We know you've got some talented people out here that should come and share with us their talents. Sheets to sign up are in the table in the foyer. Sunday, November the 14th, in the 9:15 New Thought World Religion classes, Teresa Mesqua, who she's going to speak on The Universe is Calling by Reverend Eric Butterworth. The LGBTQIA group is hosting Thanksgiving dinner on November the 21st at 6 p.m. Please bring a dish to share and a drink of your choice. It's requested that you RSVP via the Facebook event so that we know how many are to plan for. Friendsgiving is November 25th at 2 p.m. Please be sure to RSVP to sign up by signing up. Call the church office or to let us know how many and what potluck dish you're going to bring. We'll be decking the halls after the service Sunday after Thanksgiving. Many hands make light work, so please plan to join us and help decorate the church. Always a fun event. Please come and join us when we do this, because it's always so much fun. Finally, today after the service, there is a volunteer training for the Cold Weather Crisis Shelter. We're going to feed you some pizza, and please, if you have any interest in volunteering, please make sure that you show up for this volunteer.
Don't forget the basket, too, on your...
And there is a basket. We have many ways for you to give through Tithely. There's a basket back at the back, and we thank you guys. Thank you guys at home for joining in with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.